Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me and really excited to be with you today. Thank you for having me. And I want to take you back a few years where I was in New York City. It was a winter's evening. I think it was February. It was about 2 in the morning. We'd just been in a nightclub celebrating a friend's birthday. And we came out and were anxious to get a cab home. I was with a friend of mine, Andrea. She was going uptown. I was going downtown. And we were shivering in the cold. And eventually, a cab came. He pulled up and I jumped in. And I told him where I was going. He looked around at me and then he said, "Ma'am, you need to get out of the cab." I said, "What do you mean? I've just sat down." "Ma'am, you need to get out of the cab. I'm not working tonight. You need to go." But I've just sat down. You pulled up for me. Your light was on." "Ma'am, you need to leave." So flustered and angry and irritated and cold, I stepped out of the cab. And Andrea and I stood on the pavement as we watched the cab driver drive maybe 3 meters, 4 meters up the road. The light flicked back on and a group of white kids jumped in the cab and he was gone. We were mad. Our mouths dropped open. It was like, what the heck has just happened? Now, before I continue my story, I want to say thank you so much again for having me here. And today I am going to be talking about something that will help people want to talk to you. It will help people to trust you, and you will be able to in turn help the people around you walk taller and feel more confident. Now, what is that thing that I'm going to talk about for the next 27 minutes or so? It is empathy. I'm going to talk about the 3 C's of empathy, because empathy, as you probably know, is the ability to understand the feelings of another person. And with all that's going on in the world at the moment, pandemic, Black Lives Matter, all sorts of things happening, we need empathy more than ever. So I'm gonna go through the 3 C's of empathy, and you can start thinking actually, what do you think those are? Okay, because I will unveil each of them to you in time. Now, connection isn't one of them, just to let you know, but of course, connection comes first, whether we're in our home lives with friends and family, or of course, in business as well. And having that connection, that human connection with people is so important, more so than ever. And you've probably heard this quote: nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is, of course, paramount. And I don't think it's ever going to go away. Now, people often think, well, empathy, it's just a soft skill, or, not so important, especially in the tech world. It's all about the numbers and the hard facts and the technology. And I work with a lot of tech companies. But here's Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, and he claims that empathy is amazing for innovation as well, because when you understand how your clients and customers feel, you can create the best solutions for them. So I'm a real advocate of the importance of empathy. Here's a few more stats. 77% of workers would work longer hours for a more empathetic employer. And then of millennials, 80% have said that they would leave their company if less empathy was displayed by the senior teams. So super, super important. And it has implications also, of course, for inclusion, which is so important now. And of course, Barbara just talked about diversity and inclusion initiatives at Hotwire, but it also has implications for wellness, which I'll tell you about later. And of course, for employee engagement, because when people feel they're being listened to and understood, they're obviously going to go the extra mile for their team, for their manager, for their employer. So let me take you back to the cold winter's night where I've just been booted out of a taxi in New York City. And I want to share as well that this talk, I see my talks as being conversations. I don't want to just sit here talking at you for the next 30 minutes. So I am going to be inviting you to pop things in the chat. And I also have a number of polls. So I really do want to hear from you as I go through this talk. So we're back anyway in, well, not inside the taxi, we're back on the street in New York. And Andrea and I managed to remember the taxi driver's number plate. Okay, so I'm thinking, no one's going to do this to me. This man is going down. I don't know where taxi drivers go to when they do bad things, but this man is going down. Got home and I made a complaint. Anyway, time goes forward. It's the day of the hearing. Andrea and I both take days off work to attend the hearing, and I go into the courtroom, the room, and I see the taxi driver there. It's the same guy. I recognize his hairline. He had a very spiky hairline. I recognize that, and I said my piece. I left. Andrea then had to go in and say hers. And when she came out, she looked shaken. She looked like she was nearly crying. And she said to me, Shola, look, I'm really sorry. I think this isn't going to go anywhere. And I said, well, why? And she said, well, they asked me, did I see his face? And it was dark. I didn't really see his face properly. And I had to be honest. And I thought, through all my feelings of upset and anger and self-righteousness, I had forgotten to be curious. I'd forgotten to sit down with Andrea and actually ask her what she had seen that night. Was she in a position where she could back me up with this hearing? And because I was just so comfortable with feeling upset and angry, I forgot to listen. I forgot to be curious. So in the end, nothing came of it. But curiosity is the first C that I want to share with you today, which is part of being a more empathetic human being. Because if we're not curious about what's going on for the people around us, how can we ever get to understanding what they're feeling? So I want to ask you, are you too comfortable to be curious? Because I heard Barbara's keynote and she talked about curiosity and that was one of the reasons for her success. But we all need to be more curious about each other, and assumptions are killing us because it's so easy as humans, we're biased, we make those quick assumptions, and quite often they are wrong. So it's that attitude of curiosity that will help us move forward and be so much more empathetic. So you've probably all heard of the film Bad Mums, but I want to talk today about bad listeners, and let's zoom in on this here. And this is my first poll because I want you to think about which one of these are you. Now, maybe you are absolutely perfect. I don't really know, okay? Maybe you're perfect, but maybe you're not. And there are some listeners here. We've got the stage hog. These are people that take over the conversation with their own experience. We've got the pseudo, I'm a pseudo. I often pretend to listen, but I'm in my head. We've got the selective. These are people who only listen when the subject is of interest to them, right? We've got the ambush. These are people who are kind of quite sensitive, right? And they're listening, waiting for you to slip up so they can jump in. And then we finally have the defensive, okay? These people that take everything personally. Oh, you're talking about me, okay? So there's an expression which is awareness is curative, which means that once we know what we're doing, once we have that awareness, we can start to stop. So if you can just, yeah, I can see people are choosing who they are now. Okay, at the moment, let's see, we've got the stage hog, pseudos, selective, most people are selectives. Okay, so I'm going to end the polling so you guys can see, just a few more coming in, so I'll just wait a second. Yeah, so the selective seems to be the winner. So they only listen when something's of interest. And that's a big deal right now, of course, isn't it? Because we can choose the news that we watch. We can choose the sources of information that are available to us. So we are probably all becoming a lot more selective because there's so much going on around us every single day. So yeah, all of you selectives out there, just be aware of who and what you are. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this and carry on. Thanks for contributing though. Okay, great. Let's close that poll up. Brilliant. So now let's carry on with the presentation. So here's the next C of empathy. I know it's not a cat. They might surprise you, but this is a cute picture nevertheless. But we've talked about my experience in New York City with the taxi driver and how I wasn't curious enough with my friend Andrea. I wasn't listening. And now let's go on to the second C of empathy, which is not kitty cats, but courage. Okay, so some much bigger cats here. So courage, because it's not always easy to go where someone else is feeling. Okay, and that can be a real blocker for us to feel empathy and display empathy for the people around us. And let me tell you another personal story, because for me, the people that I have the most respect for in my life are my foster parents. Now, years and years ago, when I was born, when I was about 3 months old, I was fostered. And I always knew that when I got to about this age of 11, I'd have to go back and live with my birth parents. However, my foster parents knew this too, but they still raised me as their own child. They gave me tons of love. I had a great childhood. But for me, I had no choice. I knew I had to go back. But for them, they knew that this child that they had loved for 11 years would one day be taken away. And yet they still went there, and they were still loving parents. And that for me is real courage. The courage to feel, the courage to know that perhaps what you're going to feel is not going to make you feel that great. There are going to be ups and downs, but you still take it on anyway. So that's what I mean by being a courageous feeler. And we have the opportunity when we're displaying empathy to also flex our courage muscles. And it's so important. You show you this other slide. Here's a quote from Maya Angelou. And she says, I think we all have empathy, but do we have the courage to display it? Do we have the courage to approach a colleague and ask them what they're feeling, knowing that they may shut us down? They may say, no, I don't want to talk about it right now. But do we have the courage at least to ask? Incredibly, incredibly important. So let's take this back to the workplace. I told you a personal story, about my upbringing, but every year LinkedIn publishes its top 5 soft skills in the workplace. And people often push back when they hear this term soft skills, because they're not easy, are they? It's not easy to have certain conversations. It's not easy to get on with everybody around you. It's not easy to have difficult conversations when they're required. So they're not really soft and easy skills, but let's call them soft skills for today. So what are the top 5 soft skills in the workplace? Well, let's look at 2015. Okay, so back in the day, it seems like so long ago, we had communication, and it was number 1, organization, teamwork, always punctual, number 4. That seems like something from the Stone Age now, doesn't it? Obviously, punctuality is assumed, but to have it at top 4 in the top 5 is almost humorous. And then finally, we've got critical thinking. Now let's jump forward to where we are today. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to pop in the chat. What do you think is number 5? Okay, some of you will probably say empathy. It's going to be connected with that, which is what I'm talking about, but pop in the chat. So we've got number 1 is creativity. Number 2 is persuasion. 3, collaboration. So you can see these are much more sophisticated skills now that are required of us in the workplace. So Ashley said understanding. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else? Any other takers? Drew says compassion. Caroline, resilience. Okay. Cam, listening. Flexibility. They're all pouring in now. Flexibility. Fantastic. Any more? Empathy. Yeah. Something connected with that. Positivity, flexibility, inclusion. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you for sharing those. Well, I'm going to share that. EI, openness. Openness, emotional intelligence. Okay. So we've got a few people who've got the right answer. And that is emotional intelligence. That is now for the first time ever in the top 5 skills, soft skills in LinkedIn. So we're seeing how important these complex skills have become in the workplace. And so some people will say, well, what does emotional intelligence mean? What is it made up of? And in no particular order, emotional intelligence is made up of social skills. And yeah, thanks, Caroline, for your question. It's not in order of importance. They're just randomized here. So the first one is social skills and self-awareness, self-regulation, the ability to actually control yourself and your behavior, motivation, and there we go, number 5 is empathy. So emotional intelligence is complex, right? You can see what it's made up of, but empathy is in there. Okay, let's move on. So the question now becomes, is empathy too much hard work? So I talked about my foster parents, what they took on, the heart-wrenching time when we were separated from each other. And, even at a smaller scale, is it too much hard work to empathize with somebody and put yourself out there and feel stuff? And I discovered that personally, when I was at work and different situations, people would be talking about their childhood. And I'd mentioned that I was fostered, okay? And I had a great childhood. But people would assume, oh no, there's going to be some heart-wrenching, difficult story coming up. And I'd see panic in their eyes, okay? And they would change the subject, or they would just move on to something else. And I want you to think to yourself, when there are conversations going on around you in the workplace, or even with friends and family, are there situations where you just think, oh my gosh, I don't want to go there. This sounds like hard work. Boom, shut it down, change the topic now. Because if you do want to flex those muscles and be more courageous and more empathetic, then sometimes you're going to have to go there and take part in those conversations. But luckily for us, there are 3 types of empathy, and let's zoom in on those now. The first one is what we call cognitive empathy, which is I get how you feel, okay? Something happened, you just lost your job. I get how that must feel for you, okay? The second type of empathy is what we call social empathy. And that's when you feel what somebody else feels. It can be called emotional contagion. You know, when we're back in the office, there's one person who's, whatever mood they're in, the whole office feels it, right? It may be that person in your office. But that's when you feel what somebody else feels. So if they're upset, you're upset. If they're happy, you're happy. Now, that may seem to a lot of people, that's what empathy really is, okay? But this kind of empathy does not correlate well with wellness. So if you can imagine, one person is feeling down, debilitated, upset, everybody does, okay? That is not going to be good for your wellness. So luckily for us, there is a third kind of empathy, which we call empathic concern. And this is the one that is the best one really to go for, because this correlates positively with wellness. And it also correlates with you wanting to make things happen, good things happen for that person. So basically what you do is you understand how they feel, but instead of you feeling exactly the same thing, your desire is to try and help in some way. Now, it may not be that you have to fix their problem. Maybe helping is just listening. Okay, and a lot of managers feel that, oh, I've got to fix it, solve it. But that's not always what's needed. But empathic concern correlates positively with wellness, because when we do good things for others, we feel better. Let's move on to my next slide. So the next question is, who can you reach out to? Whether friends, family, colleagues, who can you reach out to and show some more empathy, okay? And when I work with people in consulting jobs, I typically say to them, right, can you put together a plan? Let's brainstorm right now, here and now, who can you reach out to be more empathetic towards? And we are all biased as humans, so it's very easy for us to reach out to people who are like us, that we get on well with, but it's much harder to reach out to people who are very different than we are. So for example, you could reach out by someone's ability, by their class, by their race, their gender identity or their gender, their generation, their point of view, their personality. They could be an introvert, you're an extrovert, okay? But I want you to think about this. And of course it's harder now because we're all dispersed, right? We're all working remotely. But thinking about this, is there somebody you can touch base with? Can you drop an email to somebody and say, oh, I've been thinking about you. It's been a few months since we spoke, okay? Even if it's, you can think about it in 2 ways. It could be for them and it could be for you, right? For you to flex those muscles by doing something that's compassionate, but also is challenging to yourself. Okay, so have a think about that. And here we have another poll, okay? So my second poll is, it's time to be courageous. And I want you to think about who with. Okay, you don't have to put anything in the chat unless you want to. You can name somebody in the chat, okay? But who with? Is it going to be, oh, maximize this. Is it going to be with a colleague, a client, friend or family? Other, I don't know who other could be really, but there could be another, okay? But if you're going to exercise these muscles of empathy, who is it with? So I can see here, we've got colleague, friend and family, clients, less so. But quite often, even with clients and prospects, it's that, but creating empathy, empathetic relationships, that builds trust. And it's that trust that will keep the clients coming back again and again, or that may even help you to win new business. Okay, so I think let's end it's still moving a bit. Let's give it a second more. Fantastic, it seems to stabilize. So let's end the polling now. And so colleagues seems to have won, but friend and family is close at 39%. Fantastic. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Okay, so we've looked at my taxi driver story. We've looked at being courageous feelers, having the hearts of a lion. And now let's look at the final C of empathy. And it's not C for crying baby, no, but I want to tell you another story. And it's about me. I was sitting with my life coach at the time and I was crying. I wasn't sobbing, but I was crying, a bit pathetic. And my life coach, Rashid, said to me, Shola, why are you crying? And I said, I want to be a speaker. And he said, okay, well, who do you want to speak to? I don't know. And he looked at me, okay. So what do you want to speak about? What's your message? I don't know. Okay. So I didn't know who I wanted to speak to. I didn't know what I wanted to speak about. I just had this burning desire inside me to somehow one day be a speaker. And this desire was not an ordinary desire, because if I flash back to my corporate career a few years earlier, I had been in one job as a management consultant and I'd been too afraid to speak up. So I'd been put on probation for a while, and a colleague kindly had empathy towards me and helped me. I had another job as an account director. I was let go after 6 months because I didn't like speaking up in meetings. I'm an introvert. Introverts typically need time to think. They're not great in spontaneous situations where they have to speak up. And in those days, people didn't really understand that much about introverts. So there wasn't a lot of empathy shown. But this is somebody who had these two bad experiences, on probation, fired from a job, and wanted to be a speaker. Now, my coach, Rashid, could have said, look, Shola, forget it. I know your history, forget it. But instead, he did something magical. He said, Shola, get out a notebook and get your diary. Let's make a plan for this to happen. And I was scared, right? I'm like, well, I have to take action. I really have to make this happen. But we took action that day because he was a catalyst. He took a stand and he held space for my growth. And literally within about 18 months or a year, I took an exam in performance speaking and I got the top mark of all the exam centers globally. And this is what can happen when somebody takes a stand for somebody else, when someone becomes a catalyst for someone else's growth. So this is the third part of empathy. This is you now taking a stand, maybe for yourself, maybe for somebody else, but taking a stand for things to actually happen. You've been curious, you've been courageous enough to step in and find out what's going on. And now you're saying, well, this can change. Let me stand here and take a space for your growth. And Caroline, I see your question, so I'll come back and answer that in just a moment. So change is inevitable. And I know that this whole conference is about your 3-year plan and where you're going and how Hotwire is going to change. But it's inevitable. So why can't you embrace it and be a catalyst for that growth and for that change? Now, we've all probably got that favorite teacher that we look back to and we remember that they really played a huge part in our growth and in our development. And why can't you be that, not necessarily a teacher, but be that individual who takes a stand and helps somebody else grow in a huge and outrageous way? So here's something from the Gallup organization, the poll that they did. And they discovered that when our managers at work care about us, we blossom, right? We're more likely to come up with new ideas. We're more likely to share information. We're more likely to support our colleagues just from somebody caring about us. This is the ripple effect. So imagine if all of us could display a bit more empathy for those around us. What would that do to our environments? So I want you to think about the people, again, you know, colleagues, could be clients, could be individuals in your personal life, but how can you support them? Maybe it's a few words of encouragement. Maybe it's actually saying, I'm here for you. What do you need? I can give you some time to support you. Maybe it's being somebody who's there to stretch them and say, hey, look, I can see that this is what you're achieving. I know you are capable of more. Why don't you go for this stretch goal and let's see where you get to? So that can be incredibly motivating and empowering for some people, just being stretched. And then of course, praise. Praise is amazing at helping people to flourish and to bloom. So Caroline has asked in the chat, does anyone have the ability to display empathy? Yes, empathy is a skill. It's not a trait, it's a skill. And as such, it's something that everybody can improve at. So even things like this little framework I'm giving you, the 3 C's, curiosity, courage, and being a catalyst, those 3 C's, if you keep them in mind, they can help you as you behave, day to day. They can help you to increase your ability to display empathy. Thank you for the question, Caroline. So here's another poll for you now, okay? And I'm making you work hard today with this talk, right? But I want you to think about whose big game can you hold space for? Okay, this isn't the same as who can you be courageous with, might be the same person, but whose big game can you hold space for? So if we could have that next poll, please, thank you. Okay, it could be yourself, it could be, right, I need to step up. I need to step up for myself. It could be somebody else in your life or in your work life. Okay, so whose big game will you hold space for? A lot of you are saying your own. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's about beating off that imposter syndrome. Okay, maybe it's about doing some work on your confidence so that you can step into any room with anyone, anywhere, and know that you can hold your own. Okay, so it's just important, because when we feel confident in ourselves, then of course that in turn can flourish and then help other people to flourish, because when we're confident, we help other people become so. Fantastic. Okay, think that's stabilized. Yeah, so 54% said their own. Brilliant. So in the true spirit of rewiring and this conference, fantastic. Thank you, guys. Okay, so I've shared my 3 C's of empathy, and we're coming to the end of our time together. But I want to ask you to do 3 more things before we finish. And the first one is to tell your stories, because it's as we share our individual stories that we start to see each other as people, as individuals, and not as a type or a group, but just another human being that I'm interacting with. And that no experience is worse or better than any other. It depends on how we treat that experience and how we use it day to day. So I want you to tell your stories. The second thing I want you to do is to connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear more from you. So if you've got stories to share, to tell, or if you want me to hold space for you, if you want to just pop in LinkedIn, I commit to doing this thing, and you need someone to just be there and hold space, go for it. So connect with me on LinkedIn. The third thing I want you to do is coming in just a moment. But before that, I just want to recap on these 3 C's of empathy, which is curiosity, courage, being that catalyst for change. All those 3 combined will really help you to make the world around you become a better place. So let me go back to that evening where I was in that taxi cab in New York City, and I didn't share with you, but that taxi driver himself is someone that now I think about with curiosity, because the taxi driver was someone with brown skin. I'm not sure where he was from. He could have been from someone like Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, I'm not sure. But he was somebody with brown skin. And I think about what experience had he had in his life that would get him to treat me in that way. So by thinking of people, even people that perhaps have wronged you or you feel upset about, with curiosity, it diffuses the situation and you feel much more empowered to take the next step. So I want to ask you, when we talk about next steps, what do you commit to doing now? Okay, we've talked about a lot of things. I had 3 different polls, okay? But of each of the areas that I talked about that makes up empathy, constitutes empathy, I want you to think about which of those 3 are you most committed to taking action on in this moment? Is it being more curious about the people around you? Is it being more courageous, flexing those muscles and having that lion heart? Or is it being a catalyst for change and stepping up and making sure the people around you can walk taller because of the input that you've had? Okay, it's still stabilizing. It looks as though, okay, it's out of courageous and catalyst. Wow, that's almost neck and neck. Brilliant. Okay, great. So let's stop that. So courageous has won just by a complete whisker there by 2%. Okay, so I want to hear some stories of all the courageous conversations and all the things that you guys have been doing over the next 3 to 6 months as a result of hearing this talk. So I've got one more quote that I want to share with you, and that is from Seth Godin. And it's that everyone, every single one that you interact with is changed forever. You are the catalyst for change. You may not even be aware of it, but everyone around you is changed forever. And the question is, how will they be different? And also by how much? Okay, how different will they be? So if you walk out of here today feeling like, yes, I've got the tools to make change with these 3 C's, then you're going to be on the right track. So let's release a few balloons. Woo, 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 woo. And I want to thank you so much for being with me today and also for participating in the chat. And I'm quite serious about taking a stand for your courageous growth. So please do connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear from you. Maybe what you thought of this talk or what you're going to do next. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hotwire.